All right, welcome everybody to the newest episode of the Zero Budget Podcast live, a very special episode. Today we're joined by Mansimran Kano and Qasim Rashid. Mansimran Kano has been a proactive citizen involved in democratic politics since he was a student in high school, working with the Obama campaign in 2008. He became local district chairman in Prince William County in 2014, and he ran for the Virginia State Assembly in 2017 with the support and endorsement of the local Democratic Party. Mr. Kano is currently serving as the Director of Soil and Water Conservation in Prince William County since January 2020, and he is also the current seated vice chair on the Virginia's 10th Congressional District Committee. Professionally, his background lies in business management, business analysis, and logistics, and he has facilitated and organized camps, retreats, and conferences. Mansimran, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for hosting.
Yeah. And Qasim Rashid is a human rights attorney and the Democratic nominee for Virginia's 1st Congressional District. Throughout his career, he has supported women who are survivors of domestic and sexual violence, helped children from underserved communities, and Qasim has also been involved in some pro bono immigration work and has worked with the Office of Domestic and Sexual Violence at the Virginia Poverty Law Center. He has also advocated for Christians and Jews being persecuted for their faith. In 2019, he ran for the state Senate seat in District 28, and this year he is running for the House seat for Virginia's 1st District. So, Qasim, thank you so much for being here as well.
Great to be here, guys. Great to be here.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about. We're young voters. We have a lot on our mind. So, Matt, why don't you go ahead and hit him with the first question?
All right. The first question I have you, first I'd like to say thank you for joining us today. It's very lovely to finally meet you. So the first question I have for you, you're a strong advocate for the Green New Deal, which introduces wide sweeping reform to deal with the threat of climate change. Is this threat really as existential as many make it out to seem? And what do you say to people who either don't believe it exists or already believe we've gone too far, or we're already far too gone?
Is this for me or for the soil and water expert?
No, it's for you. Sorry.
Look, I think the science on this is not in dispute. 99% of scientists agree there's strong consensus that climate change is real. It's caused by human activity. Unfortunately, that's a fact that my opponent refuses to acknowledge. In our last debate, we asked him 3 times to acknowledge a simple fact that human activity is causing climate change, and he refused to. So I don't even get into these debates anymore because this is a confirmed fact. We're seeing ocean waters get warmer, ocean levels rise, hurricanes become more severe, fires become more severe, the atmosphere is heating up. This is established fact. Now, whether we're too far along to bring about any kind of meaningful change, I think the consensus, again, the scientific facts are that we're getting close, but if we make meaningful and drastic changes now, then not only can we protect our environment and our energy, but also our economy. And this is the key point that we need to understand, that what the Green New Deal is an environmental and economic plan. You can't have one without the other. There is no Green New Deal without protecting jobs, without protecting the economy, and without creating millions of new high-paying jobs. I mean, these jobs that work in solar and wind and renewables pay $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. These are good-paying jobs that you can raise a family off of and provide a quality life for your family and for your children. And so, I'm proud of the fact that we've been endorsed by the Sierra Club, by the Sunrise Movement Virginia, and Sunrise Movement National. And I'm proud of the fact that we don't take any fossil fuel money. We're fully focused on a people-powered campaign. That's really what this has to be about. We need leaders who are not accountable to billionaire corporations, but they're accountable to we the people. That's the commitment we made when we started this campaign, and I'm proud that we've held on to that commitment.
Well, critics of the Green New Deal say that it's way too idealistic and it wouldn't actually work. So what makes you think that the Green New Deal is a realistic option for dealing with climate change?
Well, I think critics haven't actually read the Green New Deal. And I want to know who those critics are. I can't respond to like amorphous, accusations against it. But the Green New Deal, again, if you read it, I know you guys have, as critics have not, is it provides clear guidelines on how we build an economy, build an infrastructure, and build a future that accounts for environmental sustainability and economic sustainability. one of the clear and obvious and undeniable facts, even if you deny climate change,
Right.
you can't deny the fact that fossil fuels are going to run out eventually, whether it's in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, they're going to run out. And if we plan on having a worldwide sustainable economy, then we can't just plan for 10 or 20 or 30 years in the future. We have to plan for centuries into the future. So let's assume that you think climate change is a hoax, as a president and my opponent do. Are you seriously going to jeopardize your grandchildren's lives and your children's lives by asking them to live on an energy resource that's going to run out in a couple of decades? What's going to happen when it runs out? It will devastate the economy beyond what anything we've ever seen before, even worse than this pandemic.
Yeah.
So again, I want to emphasize, this is not just an environmental guideline. This is also an economic guideline. It's for our safety and our protection. And as the old adage goes, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. We can prevent climate change. We can prevent economic devastation by investing now, but we need to act quickly.
One thing is, we have to keep in mind that, even if the critics, so to speak, right, folks that don't believe in these things, and climate change isn't a faith. It's not something you have to believe. It's very simple. Is this glass filled with water? Yes or no? If it's not, then tell me what it is, right? That kind of thing. The thing is, when we talk about climate change and renewable resources, and how to sustain these resources into the next second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth generation, right? The right wing and Republicans since the 90s have been talking about the Arctic wildlife refuge and how they want to go in there and they want to explore for not only fuel but gold, and also just take apart the national treasure that we have there in the form of wildlife. And I'm very I'm very confused about that, because the conservative side is there to conserve things, right? And here they are ready to exploit not only our environment, but also our national treasures and our national wildlife refuge, right? So my thing is that no matter if you're conservative, you're liberal, you're progressive, no matter, right, what label you use to define yourself, in today's world, everybody needs to know that the next 50 years or the next 100 years, which a person being born today in 2020 has the potential to see, has the potential to live, right? In that 100 years, right, we need to know how we're going to be fueling up our homes, our cars, our public buildings, our public schools, our government, right? And what kind of those renewable resources there are that we should invest in as from the government's perspective, right? So it doesn't matter if you believe in climate change or not. We need to always be exploring renewable resources.
All right, amazing. Thank you. You mentioned, Qasim, you mentioned your opponent in your previous answer. And I have a question about that, actually. What has Whitman's track record for the past 13 years in office really been like for the people in his district? What kind of bills has he voted on and voted against? How aware of his voting advocacy do you think his constituents are? I mean, for example, many of our community own small businesses. What do you think the impact of a minimum wage increase would have on them?
Well, let me start with what he has failed on. Because on every meaningful policy initiative, he's unfortunately failed. We desperately need broadband internet, and he hasn't passed a single bill in 13 years on broadband. We desperately need healthcare access, and far from getting us healthcare access despite his promise, he wants to repeal the ACA, which would kick 20 million Americans off healthcare, including nearly 60,000 in this district alone. We desperately need someone who will take climate change seriously. He has a 3% score from the League of Conservation Voters because of his atrocious climate justice policy. We desperately need new infrastructure to create better roads, bridges, and an electrical grid. And he and the Republican Party have passed 0 infrastructure bills. So really on anything meaningful where we've needed support, he has done exactly what the corporate lobbyists have wanted him to do. Even now, with the U.S. Postal Service and the desperate need to save the Postal Service, the Delivery for America Act was a bipartisan bill that would have protected the Postal Service. 30 or so Republicans voted with Democrats, and he voted against it. notwithstanding that our veterans aren't able to get their medications, our senior citizens can't get the basic treatment they need, small businesses can't thrive or develop. But let's talk about small businesses and the minimum wage. He has voted against the minimum wage increase every single year he's been in office. Meanwhile, he's accepted a near $10,000 a year salary increase for himself. So he understands that we need to raise wages to account for inflation for himself. He just wants lower income communities to figure out by themselves. He doesn't want to actually represent them. And as far as the impact on small businesses, the studies show that raising the living wage, the minimum wage, isn't going to hurt small businesses. It's actually going to elevate them, because now people have more money to spend in their local communities, spend on small businesses, and increase their revenues dramatically as well. Seattle has the highest minimum wage in the country and one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country as well. And far from helping lower income communities, my opponent's first act of business was to increase a deficit of $1 trillion a year by giving billionaires a nearly $2 trillion tax cut while raising taxes on middle-class families and lower income families. There's a new article that came out in the New York Times right now that said that by the time the Trump tax cut that my opponent proudly voted for is completed by 2027, then anyone making under $70,000 a year will be paying more of their income in taxes than they were paying before this tax cut. So it was a scam. We got sold on a scam, and as a result, our economy is being devastated. He has done nothing productive for working families, and his record shows it. And if he had a record to run on, he would have run on that instead of attacking me and attacking my faith.
Yeah. To piggyback off of that, one thing is the purchase power of the average consumer increases, right? If I'm a worker at your store, right, and you're paying me $1 more than you used to pay me, or $2 more than you used to pay me per hour, right? That gives me an extra $10 at the end of my shift to spend on lunch at the same store or at a neighboring restaurant, right? So the purchase power goes up per day, per hour, per employee, per store, per small business. And that's something we need to ingrain into our small businesses. And one thing, Qasim just mentioned, with his track record, the $1.9 trillion tax cut, right, that we're paying for over the next 10 years into 2027, right? 8 years. In that, just to inform folks what we could have paid for with half of it. Just for half of that, for $844 million, I did this calculation like a week ago. For $844 million, we could have tackled substance abuse, drug addiction for the next 10 years. We could have tackled childcare, the infant through pre-K care for the next 10 years. We could have tackled all deforestation problems, all climate change problems on the western and eastern coast for the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. On top of that, we could have paid for over 60,000 students to attend a 4-year college degree, or 140,000 students to get an associate's at a 2-year program.
Wow. Well,
sorry, those numbers were per state.
Yeah.
60,000 and 130,000 students per state.
Wow. Just to kind of take a step back for a second, Qasim, you mentioned healthcare, so let's talk about that. In your plan, you say that healthcare is a human right, and healthcare is also like a very popular topic in this generation, right? And I think one of the biggest challenges presented to progressive candidates is convincing others about the viability of their plans. So what would you say to an older generation, or even a lot of the younger generation, that Medicare for all is the viable choice over a private system or even over a public option system?
Well, again, there's many reasons, but I'm going to give just 3 right now. Mm-hmm. And my conclusions are based on the data and the facts at hand. And the nice thing about making your decisions based on the data and facts is when you get better evidence, you can change your mind based on the evidence. That's the way we should govern. That's the way we should lead. And while I could talk till I'm blue in the face about why Medicare for all is the right option, I'm just going to give 3 very good reasons. One reason is the moral imperative. In the wealthiest country in the world, 70,000 Americans a year die waiting for healthcare. 550,000 Americans a year have their financial lives ruined because of medical bankruptcy, because they got sick or got cancer or broke a leg or had a baby. I mean, having a baby costs $35,000, which is, just bizarre and ridiculous. And so to punish people for the crime of getting sick is just preposterous and it's nonsensical. There's a reason why we have a fire department and not private fire insurance in case your house burns down. You call the fire department, your house is on fire, and they will come and put it out. The insurance that you have is through your homeowner to replace things. But the firefighters don't care if you have a fire policy or not. They will come and put out there's a reason why our law enforcement, when you call 911, if someone's breaking into your house, they don't check to see if you've paid your copay or deductible. The reason why our armed forces are not on a subscription basis, and we make sure our armed forces, our public schools, our libraries, our roads, our public access freeways are there for a reason. Healthcare has to be the same way. It's a moral imperative to make sure that Americans can truly live with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's literally in our Constitution. The second is, again, it's very similar, but individual liberties and de-burdening small businesses. Look, right now, if you're working at one company and you want to shift to another company, you have to make sure they provide the same healthcare that you and your family need. And if you want to start your own small business, that's a massive burden that you have to take on. That stifles innovation, stifles entrepreneurship. And if you can't afford it, you're risking your life by not having healthcare while you're starting this business. It stifles our ability to move around. It stifles our ability to stay with one doctor, because if the new doctor is out of network, tough luck. And if your kids have a special healthcare need, like my middle son does, then good luck finding another doctor that's going to provide the same kind of support that your past physician has. So I believe that Americans should have that individual liberty to move around, that freedom to move around, and Medicare for All allows that to happen. And then finally, for those who are financially conscious, every single study out there, even the ones done by the Koch brothers, the conservative think tank, shows that Medicare for All costs significantly less. Yes, significantly less. A recent study by Yale University just published in the Lancet that Medicare for All would cost about $450 billion less per year. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but the biggest reason is that the Medicare overhead cost is about 1% to 2%. It's the administrative cost of managing Medicare. We already have the infrastructure set up. But the private insurance model overhead cost is about 17 to 20%. That's not money that's getting you better healthcare or better medication or better treatment. That's money lining the pockets of insurance executives. It makes no sense whatsoever. And so they're not incentivized to get you better healthcare. They're incentivized to make a profit. And if it's my life on the line and your help depends on whether or not you can make money off of it, I don't like those odds. I want help because it's the right thing, not because it's going to make you money or not. And so if we switch to a Medicare for All model, it will cost about $32 trillion over the next 10 years. That's no co-pays, no deductibles, no hidden costs, no prescription drug costs, nothing. No lifetime limits. It's the full cost. The current model, which covers only about 85% of Americans, and 550,000 go bankrupt every year, that will cost about $34 to $36 trillion. And look, all this is well documented. There's a reason why 70% of Americans support Medicare for All. Look, if and God willing, when Joe Biden wins, if he wins by 70%, people will call it a landslide, rightfully so, because that is a landslide. 70% of Americans support Medicare for All. That is a landslide in how many people want it. It's high time that we move forward, we pass this moral imperative, and we make sure that healthcare is truly a human right for all of us.
Well spoken, honestly. We know that youth turnout is potentially going to be the highest it's been in years. Yet many still find themselves disillusioned with the democratic process for one reason or another. These generally tend to do with the systematic issues that go unaddressed by the political establishment. What would you say to voters who believe the system is not worth fighting for?
Look, I would tell them that their frustration and their anger is justified, and that they have every right to be skeptical and even to be pessimistic. I would caution them against being cynical, because at the end of the day, where we are now is not by accident. It's by folks who have fought on a generational level to advance the ball this far. And yes, this far, because even despite all the injustices that we're seeing, you can look at the work of juggernauts of American history. People like Robert Smalls, people like Frederick Douglass, people like Malcolm X, people like Dr. King and John Lewis and RBG, and the list goes on and on and on. Things are slowly getting better. And I say that as someone who regularly receives death threats from my faith, someone who had to go to federal court to testify against the man who threatened to kill me for my faith, someone who even during this election cycle, my opponent has relentlessly attacked me, even tried to tie me to ISIS, putting my life in danger. I get it. I'm a human rights lawyer. I know the stats, I know the data, but I also know the power of people coming together and saying enough is enough. We're not going to let this continue. We're going to fight back, not just this year, not just next year, but on a generational scale. And that is the message that I want to get across, that anything worth doing is worth doing consistently and worth doing with a level of conviction that no one has ever seen before. If all you can do is vote, at the very minimum vote. But those who are going to invest their time, invest their money, run for office yourself, you absolutely should, because this country belongs to we the people. It belongs to all of us. We have every right to be at that table as anyone else, and it's high time that we took that opportunity and made sure we had a seat at that table.
And let me sort of follow up on that. Voters should know that the electoral college math, a lot of folks are sometimes skeptical about, is my vote really going to matter? Is Trump or Biden going to win without my vote? Because it doesn't really matter. Electoral college, and this, that, and the other. Well, even if you have that skepticism, and like Qasim said, don't let it become cynicism, the electoral math does not apply to local congressional races like Qasim's, So even if there is a disconnect there and you still believe that it's there, definitely go out there and vote for your congressional candidates. In this case, Qasim Rashid for the Virginia First, right? Which starts from Gainesville, Virginia, and goes down to Stafford, all the way down to Spotsylvania County, right? So no matter where you are, go out there and vote on Tuesday for your congressional candidates. Even if you think that the national vote isn't going to matter, still go out there and vote. It matters. These races are counted per vote. So somebody like Qasim could win, getting 16,001 vote, and Whitman could get 16,000. That one vote matters, right? So just that needs to be reiterated as much as possible.
Yeah, definitely. Just one last thing, because I know you do have to leave soon here, but this is a topic that's important to me, and I imagine a lot of the people watching. I'm a Sikh. A lot of the audience here are Sikhs. Today marks the 36th anniversary of the 1984 Sikh genocide in India, and almost 3 years of Juptej Singh, aka Jaggi, a prominent Sikh activist who spoke out against the oppressive regime, being jailed, tortured, and silenced without any just cause or a fair trial. So you have acknowledged this case in the past, but my question to you is, will you work as a congressman towards the freedom of Juptej Singh and more broadly speaking, hold countries like India accountable for their numerous human rights violations against the people of Punjab and other ethnicities?
Look, earlier you mentioned when you introduced me that I've fought for the religious freedom of Christians and Jews. Hindus and Sikhs and atheists fall into that camp as well. My focus has been to fight for universal freedom, religious freedom, and freedom of conscience for people of all faiths and no faiths. And yes, specifically for Sikhs as well. I don't want to get accused of being thrown into the all lives matter camp. Like, we're talking about genocide. I get that, and absolutely, I've been crystal clear on this aspect. And when it comes to holding nations accountable, including India, including Pakistan, including the United States, this is why, while I'm running as a Democrat, my commitment is to uphold justice as a supreme standard. And so absolutely, when we talk about human rights activists, making sure they have their day in court, making sure they are heard, making sure that their cries are listened to, as every human being has that right, you have my firm commitment to be an ally and to continue to push this narrative. And this is really the key element that I want to get across, that I don't view my election as a victory for me. That's for me very minimalistic and remedial. I view this as a victory for a community that hasn't had a seat at the table. The South Asian community has historically been pretty marginalized. Now, we have some amazing South Asian representatives in Congress. They do amazing work. They do phenomenal work. But this is where my commitment to the folks of the First District is to be accessible and to be available and to make sure that when we have these matters to discuss, we can discuss them in person in an open and an honest and transparent manner and move forward collectively as a community. That's extremely important to me. I don't view this conversation as transactional. I don't think that just because somebody watched this podcast, suddenly they're going to vote for me. I view this as transformational, as an ignition to a conversation, to a relationship that we will continue to grow and develop, built on trust. I certainly hope to have your vote, but more importantly than that, I hope that once we win, God willing, that you are all in my inbox on November 4th so that we can work together and get to work.
Yes.
All right. Well,
I just want to make a last push out for the vote. People living in Spotsylvania County, Stafford County, Prince William County, anybody in the Virginia First, look up, go to Google and go to Who's My Legislator. Okay, if your current legislator is Congressman Rob Whitman, get out there on Tuesday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Vote for Qasim Rashid for Congress.
The only correction I'll make to that, my brother, is that it's from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. So let's get every hour of voting in there possible.
That's one more hour you can vote for my brother.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you both so much for taking time out of your very busy schedules. I imagine to come and join us and have a conversation. Thank you everybody for listening. Make sure to get out there and vote on Tuesday. I think now's our real opportunity to make some change. So let's make sure that we take that. So like, comment, and subscribe, that whole thing. But more importantly, the voting thing. Make sure to go out and vote. Really appreciate you guys being on here, honestly, and I really appreciate everybody for listening. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Qasim. Thank you so much. Thank you, Juptej, Matt,
God bless you guys.
for your podcast.